Ask questions in our mailbag. Plus, what roads should you avoid this week ahead? I'll outline a few of our detours. And it's hard to notice, but we build so much more than roads. We'll speak to our first ever economic development administrator on his role and the role economic development plays in the livability of Minot. Let's get ready for this week ahead. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me and welcome in to This Week Ahead. If you've been paying attention to what I've written or read and broadcast the last 2 weeks or so, you should know construction season is here. That work just started and will grow as the weather gets warmer. But it's important to remind you that we do so much more than just build streets. Sure, we build water and sewer lines, but as your municipal government, we're trying to do everything we can to build a stronger community. But what does that mean? Good question, me. Well, it means we're looking at improving our zoning codes, for example, to make more comprehensive laws to the state of our community and easier use for the builders, the contractors, architects, and engineers. We're building safer streets by improving the way we patrol and focusing our resources on the right place. We're building assurance for you and your family by making sure our fire response time is among the best in the nation. We're even trying to build credibility and boost your confidence in us by proactively and reactively communicating to you. This being a great example. These are only some of those examples of what we're doing to build a better community, covering each aspect of tangible and intangible impacts to your life. Among the intangible aspects is economic development. That effort is important because it can create jobs, improve quality of life, and have a true and lasting impact to the future of Minot and the communities outside of it. It turns intangible ideas into real, tangible results. 2 years ago, in fact, the International Economic Development Council did an assessment of Minot and found several strengths that include our current partner, MACEDC, a renovated downtown that is ripe for growth, and our regional attractions that we have. That's where our efforts and our story begin. Minot has a magic fund, for example, that can help bring in new jobs and businesses. Minot has businesses that are already thriving and growing. Minot has a ton to work with, but we also have some holes to fill. That's per the assessment of the IEDC. The challenge is working with our fantastic community partners to fill those gaps. We've done much of that through community stakeholder groups. Now we need to cut to present day here. We've hired an economic development administrator, the first in the city. His name's Jonathan Rosenthal. We'll talk to him in just a minute. He's here to help build a relationship with those existing partners and then identify and fill those aforementioned gaps. It's a brand new department, but it's building something. This month alone, council approved a program Jonathan brought forth, a parklet and streetery program that will allow downtown restaurants to expand seating into the streets safely, might I add, as well as efforts to resume the design and engineering of a community wayfinding program. Both activities have different payoffs. One, for example, is good for downtown commerce. The latter gears more towards tourism and the overall health of the community. But both are examples of the tangible actions we're taking to create a stronger economy in the Magic City. It's only the start. With our fairly new formed community development department and our adjacent community partners, we're building something more than just roads. It's a roadmap that brings us forward. Now let's get a better idea of what this map may actually look like. The work it takes, the effort that has already been done. I want to bring in the city's first ever economic development administrator, Jonathan Rosenthal. Jonathan, good morning, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, you.
Jonathan, I want to start with you, and then we'll go on to what you're working on. Jonathan comes from, he comes with a wealth of experience and knowledge. The only knock I can find is he's from the East Coast. Okay, so cut him a little bit of slack. But we can work with that. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about your background in economic development and what helped you correctly choose Minot?
Well, I probably need to start with that I worked in Des Moines, Iowa, so I want to, claim some Midwestern experience. I mean, I met my wife in Des Moines and, spent a fair bit of time there. Um, uh, but my background, my master's degree is in public finance from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. I've worked in, I mentioned Des Moines, I've worked in Syracuse, New Haven, Connecticut, Bristol, Connecticut, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, probably missing a few other places. And actually, you mentioned IEDC. When I was in graduate school, I interned in Washington, D.C. for one of the precursor organizations, the National Council for Urban Economic Development. Um, now, um, I was recruited with a headhunter to come out to look at this place. But people think, people accept jobs and it's all a one-way street. But you have to be convinced that, at a certain point, that it's a worthwhile thing to do, especially when you're relocating. And I think you covered a fair bit of that in your intro. Uh, there's so much going on here. There's so much to work with. The fact that the city has dedicated some of its sales tax to doing a variety of activities. It includes the Magic Fund, but there are other infrastructure elements that are covered. Uh, I think they're building an organization. It isn't just about economic development. Related items are making certain that our development organization, our planning, other community development activities, our uh, inspection services and building department, which are connected to this department, are all doing their best to make development a good experience in Minot. And so, having seen that commitment, I felt that it was worthwhile to come here. And I would also add, and again, talking about the IDC study, there have been a number of planning studies where the city's taken a deep dive into what it needs to do in order to be successful. You mentioned in your intro about a roadmap. There have been several roadmaps through the planning processes that have been done. And I think that people will complain about plans as something, you put them up on the shelf and they never get heard from again. That only happens if you ignore what you're being told. One of the things that, although I come with a variety of experiences that are related to some of the needs here, and I certainly have ideas of best practices. The fact is that the community sat down and said, "This is what we need." There were dozens of people involved. It was open to the community to make comments, and they made the roadmap. When I was brought in, it was clear that the IDC study and some of the other studies were something that were the path for me to follow in terms of looking for things to do and to solve. And so I've been working with a number of groups here, with the Chamber, with the Downtown Business and Professional Association, with Visit Minot, to look for others, to look for things that we can do to, begin to deal with those things in the plan. And that's what I'm doing.
Now, the position you hold, the Economic Development Administrator position, it's brand new. You were the first ever for the city of Minot, but certainly economic development as a concept is not new. You
No.
mentioned our community partners, and we have a great tool to use in the Magic Fund, something that many communities actually don't have to go to. We also have the newly reorganized MACEDC that's been carrying the load of economic development for decades. How does your role specifically fit into what we've already been doing and what we want to do going forward?
Yeah. Well, I think to some extent, you always have to be looking. People always look to the kind of biggest player. I mean, we certainly have had these other organizations, but a lot of the funding has come through the city. Uh, uh, so it wasn't that the city wasn't involved, but not involved in a coordinated kind of way. Uh, so as the organizations uh, b- uh, become a little bit more involved, I don't think we're a particularly large number of people, but and I'm the only one, strictly doing economic development. Although I would include the city manager working on that as well. Um, I would say that uh, uh, we it was pointed to in the IDC study that it was a need for better coordination. You need somebody on the inside who's knocking off the elements that have to be done, making certain that the city is moving its piece along. We want the cooperation, we need the cooperation of these other organizations. They play a little different role, but some of the big infrastructure issues, some of the funding issues, uh, the coordination issues of going after federal funding, doing state funding, when there are certain incentives, they really require somebody on the inside doing it. We had, for instance, a Renaissance zone program. It's a valuable program, but it was kind of tossed on to the activities of the planner. The planner wasn't set up to promote it. The planner wasn't set up to look at the big policy issues. Not that a pretty good job wasn't done, but it means a lot more when you have somebody who's really dedicated to that activities or those activities. And that's what the city decided. That's what the IEDC, when they looked at it and said, you need someone in the city to do that. And that's what I was hired to, I think also, as you said, kind of plug the holes.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Renaissance Zone, which is a tax incentive program for people in the Renaissance Zone. But you've been also introducing more ideas, not just things that have already existed. I mentioned one program you already had council approval on. It's the Parklet and Streetery program. I love this idea. It was really cool. We worked together on this, and you mentioned that
And
it's
thank you.
this works. This works in other places, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that and what else you've been up to?
Yeah, I got a couple slides here if I can just point to it a little bit. This slide is a parkland and a streetery are the same kind of physical platform, little different application. And a streetery is eatery is stuck into the word street combined. And what you see in these two illustrations together here is on the left, you can see how an elevated platform equal with the height of the curb and the sidewalk extends the sidewalk into a parking space, and it allows seating, so you can have outdoor dining. As this illustration also shows, it accommodates somebody in a wheelchair. It allows for free passage of people walking along the street. There's enough room for, depending on the the width of the sidewalk, to allow for dining right next to the building as well as out into the street. And it's cordoned off from the street for safety. Again, that same illustration shows stop blocks, curb blocks that would prevent cars from coming too close. It can only be used as we've proposed it in downtown because the traffic is slow enough. You've got to be under 25 miles per hour. And there's also a designated parking lane. If you were to do this on a street like Broadway, traffic is too fast, there's not really a parking lane. That prevents it from being done. And the illustration on the right-hand side of this same slide is shows how in cross-section, how there's a barrier on the backside of where these folks are sitting, and then there's a 3-foot high, happens to be landscape barrier It prevents somebody from going into the street, and how it's leveled beneath the platform to allow for drainage and so forth. And then it also shows that it's equal in height to and level from the existing sidewalk. And I think this will open up the possibility of more dining. You'll see more people on the street. It's engaging in a lot of ways. People can use low voltage lighting, things like that that can make it more interesting. And a parklet is a version of this that really is meant to be just what it says, a parklet, a small park. I think we'll see less of those, but I was speaking, I know we have interest immediately from one dining place, and I think we'll get two or three in short order, if not immediately this year, then over the next year or so.
It'll be really
So,
great to see these kind of blossom across our main street, right? Because this is downtown
yes.
specifically, but these are really cool concepts that we could see almost immediately.
Yeah, look, there are some things that can be done, in downtown that can't be done everywhere. But on the other hand, there are things that are done in, some of those more suburban style developments that can't be done downtown either, especially if they need a lot of space, a lot of outdoor display space. Uh, there's different parts of the city accommodate different kinds of development.
So when you talk about here, let me pull it up again so we can get a look at it. When we talk about things like this, the eateries and the parklets, and any other kind of programs that are like this, how do they actually benefit the city? Why is this a good program for us to utilize?
Well, over time, you get more development. Um, the city benefits from a certain portion of the sales taxes. So the more we have people out using facilities and buying, but I think if we're talking how it affects downtown, is the more enthusiasm you have in downtown development, the more you get of it, the more people want to feel that it's a good place to go. It benefits the consumer, feeling that they want to engage with downtown more. But the more the consumer comes downtown and is involved, the more people want to make investments downtown. I think I think we're taking a pretty comprehensive approach. I mean, this is one piece. We could talk a little bit about wayfinding signage if you like, and you did mention that.
Yeah, I kind of want to do talk about that. So you just got a approval from council to move forward with the continuing design and engineering of the wayfinding program, which was another piece of the IEDC recommendation. It's been approved and we're ready to march forward. Businesses can apply now for parklet permits. Really, what I want to know now, Jonathan, is what's next?
Oh, what's next? Okay.
Oh,
Well,
was that an exciting question?
yes, of
That's all I do
course.
here is exciting questions.
Let's. Um, well, I'd like to talk a little bit about facade improvements. Now, we're not quite ready to. We're not there yet. We're dealing with. We've been meeting with for months.
Jonathan, let's set the table for us a little bit because you and I know what facade improvements are, but tell us a little bit of what a facade improvement is.
Oh, yeah. I was getting there. I think that I just want to tell you that I was meeting with the owners downtown, and hearing from them, and with the Downtown Business and Professional Association, and what one of the IDC recommendations, and it shows up in a number of plans, is the need to address the facade improvement in downtown. You have a number of buildings that are roughly 100 to 120 years old. They've been fiddled with in ways that ultimately weren't very good. I will show you an example of the former Woolworths building to give the listeners and viewers a little better look at what it means about at least one particular building. But if we could show that first slide there,
Sure. Here,
um,
let me pull up.
what what's happened over time is degradation of the building. Now, in what you have in mostly a lot of first floors is over the years, instead of respecting the architecture as it was originally built and kind of working with that in a thoughtful kind of way, they took the first floors of the building and covered them up. And they just kind of threw something on the front of it. Might have been some brick over, might have been some metal, corrugated metal. Uh, they put on some signs, kind of, slapped some signs on there. And I certainly don't blame any of the current owners that these buildings were in this condition when these businesses moved in. But in the case of these two buildings, there's been some damage. The brick building on the right has had a cornice removed, and it's exposed a lot of soft brick. There's some wood up there that was meant for nailing surfaces. All of that's exposed. When that's done, and you can see the building was built in 1905. All of that will eventually damage the building in a substantial way. The windows are old and leaky and energy inefficient. They're attractive enough, but they need attention. So essentially, the building needs attention from top to bottom, and it's relatively expensive at this point. I would point to that there's a market failure in terms of how much rent can be faced, the amount of demand for the buildings, and then the cost of them. In the building on the left, you can see that the second floor, somebody put in these teeny tiny windows where there used to be several large windows all together, and threw in some plywood to fill in the space. That is repeated over and over and over again on Main Street and elsewhere in downtown. The little bit of the building showing next to the building on the left, there's actually a ballroom on the second floor of that building, and it's completely covered up. You would have no idea that there's anything up on the second floor. So a facade improvement program helps the owner, changes the economics that allows the owner or the tenant to make changes that are required. That the view that we've taken, that we're going to suggest, is that we do a complete rehab top to bottom of the buildings, and that we need to do it so that we have an impact in the community to change the visual center of the city, and that it becomes attractive and usable. And I think the other element that we want to address, separate from facades, is getting those upper floors occupied. They're underutilized, great deal of vacancies, and if you took underutilized and vacant on Main Street, you're talking close to 100% of the upper floors of those buildings. A few are really in good shape, but many of the older, especially in the older buildings, art space is brand new, and of course that's right on Main Street, and that's an excellent condition. But there are a number of buildings that are underutilized, and in the long run, there's that slow degradation, and at some point, the buildings become unusable. What we need to do is head that off and to help change the economics so that when those upper floors are occupied, you have a steady rent stream that doesn't rely just on the first floor of the building, only retail. So more diversification of the rental structure. And I think most importantly, and this is also pointed to in the studies, is you need more people with disposable income living downtown who spend money, and they go to the restaurants and the bars and the retail places downtown, and that changes things. I think we're going to have other opportunities as the hospital makes some changes. When we resolve some of the legal issues with parking garages, the areas above that, But in the meantime, getting those buildings in order is would be very positive for downtown in terms of changing the economics.
So you mentioned a lot about downtown. A lot of your projects are downtown, and that's really around the centric idea that IEDC focused quite a bit on downtown. But that's not all we're doing for our community. We're we're not just looking at one aspect. We're looking at everything, right? Can you name a few things that we might be executing as an organization to help with all of your efforts across the community wide?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really important. Uh, Whatever the importance of downtown, we care about the entire city and we work on it. Now, I'm part of community development. We have building officials, we have the inspection people and planning people, and we've worked on a number of programs. In short order, I might forget a few, but Shields, Urban Gourmet, Bremer Bank, Tractor Supply, Sears Hometown Store, the U-Haul Storage and Rental. And then we've got a couple projects on, they're not named yet, but up on North Broadway, there's 5 new businesses that are slotted just over the river on the north side of Broadway there. Um, all of which the city has encouraged and worked with. The ones on North Broadway, qualified for Renaissance Zone assistance, and we've worked with the owners on that. And I'd also mention, not through this department, but through our redevelopment, Blue on Broadway is another project. It's got a little park involved, affordable housing above, and then commercial on the first floor. So there are a number of things that we're doing, and those are spread throughout the city. And we're also looking at the potential for doing a tax increment financing of substantial size on the south side, but that's in discussion, and we'll see how that goes. It's private development, and we'll see if that comes along. But we're working with people on any number of projects. So we care about the city. The ones you more likely hear about and go directly through city council are about downtown, but by no means is that it. And we also worked with the Convention and Visitors Bureau to do a attraction program for events, and we just hosted. And I give a lot of credit to Stephanie Shanerock doing the National Women's Hockey Championship, which was just last weekend. A great event.
Jonathan, we gotta wrap up here, but I want to end with a little bit of a rallying cry for what you and our other partners do for the community. You mentioned that those programs that we have. You've only been in that seat for 7 months. There's a lot more up ahead. I trust that. And I mentioned before the function that economic development has in helping us build the future of Minot. But why is that? What benefits does economic development have for Minot and the adjacent communities?
Well, I mean, in the end, you have to be. I mean, you can leave it all to chance, and sometimes that works out. But I will mention that there are places that have become ghost towns. The businesses left slowly. The people left, and we can proactively work to make certain that we're attracting and keeping the jobs that will benefit us in the future. That we make the kind of infrastructure investments that, um, I, some of it's about the economy, but some of it's about general quality of life. That we're making the kind of investments that make people want to live here. That people can travel, and people can locate. They can go to other places within the state. They could go to Fargo or elsewhere. They can go to other states, maybe not so far away, but people go to Denver and Minneapolis and so forth. So what's going to make it that people want to be here? And that's a variety of things. And I really feel the city is dedicated to all those things. And I work with some really tremendous people, and we're trying to do integrated economic development, integrated development with engineering and public works. Uh, I know that's the city manager wants us working together, communicating. Um, uh, but in terms of economic development itself, it's looking closely at what those jobs, what those investments are going to be for the future that pay dividends in the long run. And I think that when we talk, for instance, I want to talk about the whole city, but when we mention downtown, are those things that we do going to attract more businesses in the long run? Are people going to want to be in the city, continue to live in the city, come back, as they've gone, off? And I think we're also going to attract people from north central and northwest North Dakota, and people who maybe want to live in a little bit bigger place than the town and have a few more opportunities than the smaller towns that they've been in. But we are going to be we are and are going to continue to be to be the kind of place where people want to live, use our schools, have their kids educated, and again, find the jobs that make it possible for them to be here.
All right. Thank you very much, Jonathan Rosenthal.
Thanks for
Just
having me.
we're just scratching the surface of what you're doing. I appreciate everything that I've seen so far. A lot of cool things coming our way. And I look forward to hearing. I know that you'll be back again because I already know we're working on things specifically that the city manager wanted to get to. So this won't be
Thanks,
your
Gary.
last time joining me. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now, that's Jonathan Rosenthal, our Economic Development Administrator for the City of Minot. Stay tuned for the introduction of more programs. We just scratched the surface, like I said, and those will be coming up that will help existing and new businesses all across our community. All right, I spoke to Jonathan for a little bit. I asked him some grueling questions. Now, let me ask you a few. Let me ask you this. How would you improve traffic flow on 31st and Broadway? What is the best way to address pedestrian traffic on Minot's busiest street? Should you be able to turn left? Help us answer these questions and steer us in the right direction as we make plans on improvements to the entire Broadway corridor. This week ahead, you'll have a chance to get that data that we found on Broadway and weigh that with some of the solutions that we have going forward. There's a survey you can take now. You should also register for two different Q&As coming up in May, south of 20th Avenue South. That's May 5th, noon to 1. You'll have to register via email. You can find all of this information at movingbroadway.com. And then another Q&A session on May 6th from noon to 1. That's everything north of 20th Avenue. If you want to help drive the ship of the future design of Broadway, um, this is your chance. If that isn't motivating enough for you, how about I tell you that um, one of the alternatives is a 2-lane roundabout on Broadway? I think that sounds fun. But what do you think? Give us the details, movingbroadway.com. Okay, coming up this week ahead, lanes are closed in a couple of spots in the Magic City due to construction. You should know by now that Burdick Expressway from 1st Street Southeast to 3rd Street is a little slow moving right now. Also, 3rd Street south of the airport will be detoured for a few more days on this week ahead. You'll have to go around the softball complex. We'll have some carryover projects starting back up this week ahead as well. These will likely have less direct impact to the traveling public, but there's something to make note of. Finishing work will start on 31st Avenue Southeast come Monday. You'll see crews pouring some forms for the new sidewalks for that project. This is the finishing work of the major reconstruction project that we started up last year. That was the other roundabout that you have in the city. On North Hill, 8th Street Northwest, we'll see mobilized crews finishing up some ADA ramps and sidewalks. Plus, they'll lay some topsoil, do all that additional cleanup, finishing up that project that they couldn't quite get to just last year. Find all of those detours and more every week with the road reports. You go to minotnd.org/road closures. If you want to see what's queued up for the year in projects, you can find that online as well, minotnd.org/projects. Okay, it's been a minute since I answered your questions. Again, if you have anything you want to ask me, I'll do my very best to answer that. Send it to minotnd.org/mailbag. I do have two questions this morning. First one, boy, this one's always so much fun. Um, Here, this is the right one. There we go. Why don't you pave Sunset Boulevard? Well, the short answer is it's outside of city limits. But since this comes up often, let's go deeper into it. That stretch of road is not a Minot road. In fact, if you see something that isn't paved outside of it within the city, it's outside of city limits. All our roads are paved. That private road is maintained by us from time to time just because many years ago, the owner of that stretch allowed it to be open so emergency vehicles could get into that neighborhood quicker. It's why it's open. If the property owner wanted to close it, they could do that. They could shut it off to everybody. This is why it's open now, and this is why it's not paved. Basically, because it's not legally, technically, or literally within the city's jurisdiction. Now, in the future, perhaps this could happen. The, the plot of farmland that exists currently along that stretch could be developed into residential or commercial property, after which annexation may happen, development may happen, which would provide likely a nice, smooth, paved surface. But for now, not a horse, not a rodeo. I hope that helps everyone. Okay, our final question. This one's timely too. Why does it seem like you chip seal roads that are only a few years old? Shouldn't that be for roads that are older? Great question. It was submitted anonymously, so whoever you are, thanks for bringing that up. It's true. You may see a little preventative maintenance on a fairly new surface. That's really to try to preserve the life and condition of that street. You see, we have some roads in town um, that are rough, but we also have a ton of new, good to great condition thoroughfares as well. Chip sealing is like an oil change to your vehicle. You want to do it often to maintain the current condition of the engine, mitigate any kind of deterioration. Some of our older roads are great candidates for a mill and overlay project. We're seeing that on Burdick. This is where the surface is rough, but everything underneath that is still in good condition. It wouldn't make much sense to chip seal a bad surface, so we'll schedule that in years in advance to replace the surface. The more frequently we chip seal our good streets, the longer they'll be good. You'll see quite a bit more chip sealing this season. In fact, that's what we want to get to. More small maintenance oil changes, less large replacements of those transmissions, if we want to stick with that analogy. Okay, that's going to do it for me on This Week Ahead. Of course, if you have any more questions, please submit those to us through the mailbag. That's minotnd.org/mailbag. I want to, before I go, quickly remind you that we do still have rapid COVID screening twice a week at Fire Station 1. That's Mondays, 8 to 2, and Tuesdays, 2 to 7. Okay, next week. Looking forward to next week already because that's, well, the purpose of this. Next week on This Week Ahead, we'll talk to our traffic engineer, Stefan Jers. He'll join me to discuss the aforementioned Broadway corridor study. We'll go deeper into what's happening and what you can expect and what we want you to weigh in on. I'll ask him why he wants to install a roundabout on Broadway. Look forward to that conversation. Of course, tell us how you think we're doing communicating to you. I'd love it if you give us a little feedback on our communication efforts as a city. You can do that by going to minotnd.org/minotpio. Tell me if this program is valuable to you or if I should look for other avenues and what those avenues may be. Of course, we have another newsletter that goes out twice a month. That's The Latest. Sign up for that at minotnd.org/the latest. And please, please, please stay tuned for everything we're doing. Follow us on all of your favorite social media platforms. You can find us at City of Minot. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a real treat. Thanks again to Jonathan Rosenthal. Of course, look forward towards all the detours and everything coming up your way this week ahead.